this video, we'll be talking about shadow work, and it starts with what the shadow even is. Carl Jung first coined the term shadow, and he used it to describe the parts of ourselves that, as our life goes on, we push into our subconscious. They're parts that we, in our conscious mind, we can't stand to contemplate that we own those pieces. They might be that we project those pieces onto other people. It could even be that we have parts of ourselves that we really don't like, that we live in shame with those pieces, or perhaps something like me. I'm quite controlling, and in my past I would have called myself a control freak, and presumably you've heard that term before. It's not a very nice thing to say of someone, and certainly not something nice to say about yourself. That is a kind of a way of normalizing in society, a way of being that actually is not necessarily in the shadow, but it's not appealing or constructive. So through society and through our families of origin, we become more of some things and less of other things. And the things that we become less of are the ones that we push into the shadow. So in growing up, we are taught by our families and by schooling and by our peers, by society generally, we're taught of ways that are acceptable ways of behavior and unacceptable ways of behavior. Sometimes we develop unacceptable ways of behavior because that's how we can get the attention that we need as children. So those are the things that are in our shadows. And these shadow aspects emerge as life goes on. They tend to emerge often in symbolical form, in our dream state, in imagination. They emerge often in conflict when we are arguing with our family, with our spouse, with our parents, with our siblings. There you will often see shadow aspects coming into to do battle. So simply being aware of shadow aspects doesn't mean then that is the emergence of shadow work. Shadow work comes about when you have you've made a list of things that you'd like to achieve in your life, and you've achieved all of them, but still there's a feeling of hollowness or a feeling of dissatisfaction. It could be that you've been in the same bad relationship with 3 different people, and it just still seems like you're in that same bad relationship, as if there's some part that is sabotaging your success, and you eventually discover that the part that is doing the sabotaging is you. It's the parts of you that you've disowned that are the driving force in your life. It could be that you realize that you're a manifesting genius, but you've manifested the life that you don't want. And so that is generally the time that we then go to do shadow work. So the work involves asking really honest questions and then listening with deep listening to the answers that come up. We can do shadow work with therapists, and all Jungian therapists are trained in shadow work. We could also consult other symbolical systems, such as the tarot cards. Tarot cards speak in the same symbology as aspects of our unconscious. I find astrology to be a particularly fantastic tool to do shadow work. Perhaps you pick up a book on the shadow, or a journal of shadow working, and you go to in your journal to write in response to prompts that are prompting what might be in the subconscious. I, in fact, you will find at the bottom of this video have some journal prompts by star sign. You might want to start with that. So the goal of doing shadow work is not to destroy the shadow. It's the purpose of doing shadow work is to integrate it, to make whole all pieces of ourselves, the pieces that even we do not like. And it doesn't happen all in an instant. It takes practice. It takes constant reminding that the parts of ourselves that we dislike also have positive function if we apply them positively. An example of a shadow aspect that requires integration is something like interrupting. Now, if you're a chronic interrupter, it interferes with your ability to listen, and it interrupts with your ability to understand. But it requires some investigation as to why you're interrupting. And you might possibly find that for your whole life you've been fighting to be heard. And it's in that instant where you realize that you've been fighting to be heard your whole life that you then have a choice to make to listen to yourself, to hear yourself, to understand yourself. And that is where the integration happens. And as I say, it doesn't happen in an instant. You have to keep, every time you catch yourself interrupting, you have to remember to listen to yourself and to understand yourself. So part of doing shadow work requires that we have great self-compassion. It is very easy to knock down, to insult, to criticize the parts of ourselves that we dislike. It doesn't cause those parts of ourselves to come out into the open. It causes those parts of ourselves to go deeper underground. And so to have those pieces be made whole in us, we have to address it with great self-compassion and patience, and be willing to do the constant work that is required to keep reminding ourselves not to interrupt, to keep remembering to listen and to understand. So the benefit then of doing shadow work is not just to do hard work. The benefit is to having done shadow work is to start living life in greater alignment with your true self. Because what happens is a remembering of who you were born to be, and who you were in your true essence, and you become transformed to live in alignment with that version of yourself. The outward things that couldn't satisfy you, you eventually stop looking for satisfaction when it is resident inside of you. Carl Jung also spoke of the collective shadow, and the collective shadow you see emerging in society, and it's always emerged in society. It's much harder then to address the collective shadow out there when really our personal power allows us to deal with things in our inner world. And the benefit of completing shadow work is that the outward reflection of us then becomes transformed, and our collective shadow is an outward reflection of all of us, not one of us, but all of us together. So then the more of us that does work on our shadow aspects and dealing with our inner worlds, means that the greater transformation in the collective consciousness. So in closing, this is just a reminder that the door is always open. Come inside if you are called to do shadow work. My role in doing shadow work is to point you in the direction, but primarily it is to hold space. To hold space for the work that ultimately that you will be called to do.